Gabriella Gutiérrez Muhs. She's a full professor of modern languages, culture, gender, and sexuality studies at the Seattle University. Gabriella was raised in Durango, has written 14 books that she has shared for many different places in the world: Spain, Colombia, Chile, Mexico, El Salvador, Turquía, Francia, Argentina. Her latest book is bilingual and it's called How Many Indians Can We Be? Nuestra siguiente invitada, Gabriella Gutiérrez y Muhs, es profesora catedrática de lenguas modernas, cultura, de género y sexualidad en la Universidad de Seattle. Ella creció en Durango, ha escrito 14 libros, de los cuales ha compartido en muchas partes del mundo como España, Turquía, Francia, Chile, México, Salvador, Argentina y otros más. Su más reciente libro, bilingüe, se titula ¿Cuántos indios podemos tener? Así que por favor ayúdenme a darle la bienvenida. Help me welcome to the stage, aquí al escenario, a la profesora Gabriella Gutiérrez Muhs. Fuerte el aplauso.
Muchas gracias, Erika. Thank you to all of you who are here. I'm so very pleased to go after the danzantes, the matachines, because in Mexico, when you're a child, that is what you want to grow up and be, a danzante, a matachín. And I'm so grateful that they have blessed the space. So I wanted to talk today about why, and I'll take some questions at the end, why are we celebrating what we call Día de Muertos in general, but I call it Días de Muertos, because when you do the research, you find out that the portal between the living and the underworld is open not only for a day or two, as happens when Christianity arrives, but it is open for many of our indigenous communities still for a couple of months, right? So this is a time when we communicate with our dead. And for me, this year is very important because my mother died 4 years ago. And they say that it takes 4 years for people to get to heaven. So they're traveling to the Mictlán. Mictlán is heaven. I always surprise my students when I tell them that many people, many indigenous people believe that, that's before Christianity arrived, that heaven is the only place we went. There is no hell. There is no purgatory. So I want to ask you to imagine that for yourself. If there is no hell and no purgatory, where do you go after you die? And the reason that the Days of the Dead are so important to us is because we see death as part of life. It's a continuation. And in fact, when we're little, I remember my favorite chocolates were these little coffins, right? And we ate, and you can see the skulls everywhere. And when you really love someone, some members of your family or your boyfriend, your husband, you will give them a little skull, right? With their name on it. Entonces estaba hablando de la importancia de los días de muertos para nosotros y que la muerte es parte de la vida y eso es lo que todo el mundo envidia de nuestra cultura, ¿sí? Porque es muy natural para nosotros hablar de esto. También estaba diciendo que para nosotros es plural, no singular. Son muchos días de muertos, no solo uno. Y nuestros altares permanecen, ¿verdad? Por mucho tiempo. Estamos recordando. Les invito también a que vayan a Fisher Pavilion. I invite you to go to Fisher Pavilion and see the altars. They're really precious. And each one of them is very different. So Why is this celebration significant and a holiday for Mexicans, for many Mexicans? And I was installing an altar with my students. And in these days of hope, it's because we need hope, right? We need hope. And for Mexicans living here, this is just a mouthful of Mexico. Es una bocanada de México. Me da mucho gusto ver a la gente con sus trajes típicos, ¿verdad? Con sus trajes regionales, porque estamos teniendo una probadita de nuestro país tan maravilloso que le da tanto al mundo. We are a gift. Mexican culture is a gift to the world because of the way we envision our cosmovision, our world vision of the world, of nature, of everything that happens. So I call it, as a scholar, I call this celebration as the umbilical cord that ties us to the past, because this is one of the celebrations that no matter what religion you are, there is nothing wrong with celebrating and honoring your dead, with feeding them, with putting on their altar things that they liked. I know that my mom liked to smoke, but she stopped smoking because I asked her to. But I put some cigarettes on her altar, right? And she also loved the milk, the Ensure milk, right? I don't know why, it's terrible, but the last 10 years of her life, she just loved that. Oh my gosh, milk in a little container. Oh, how wonderful. And so I put an Ensure on her altar. I put chocolate. I made sure that her knitting and crocheting needles are there. But I also put other people that I care about, like the people who died in Florida in that club only because they were gay, or the people who die for no reason, hate crimes. Those people are also in my altar. So I want to read you a couple of quotes. One of them is by major intellectual in Mexico and philosopher, and it's Octavio Paz. And he talks about the difference in our perception in Mexico and the United States. Sí, la percepción de la muerte tan diferente. Y tengo una cita de Octavio Paz que voy a parafrasear después de leerla. To the inhabitant of New York, Paris, or London, death is a word that is never uttered because it burns the lips. The Mexican, on the other hand, excuse me, I'm having a hard time seeing. The Mexican, on the other hand, frequents it, mocks it, caresses it, sleeps with it, entertains it. It is one of his favorite playthings and his most enduring love. It is true that in his attitude there is perhaps the same fear that others also have, but at least he does not hide this fear, nor does he hide death. He contemplates her face to face with impatience, with contempt, with irony. If they're going to kill me tomorrow, let them kill me once and for all. And that's from a song. Octavio Paz in the Labyrinth of Solitude. I will try to paraphrase this in Spanish. Para el habitante de Nueva York, París y Londres, la muerte es una palabra que nunca se debe mencionar, porque quema los labios. El mexicano, por otro lado, la frecuenta, se ríe de ella, la acaricia, duerme con ella, la divierte. Es una de sus cosas favoritas para jugar y su gran amor. Es cierto que en su actitud también hay miedo. que todos tenemos, pero cuando menos no esconde ese miedo, sino que lo confronta cara a cara, con impaciencia, con ironía. Si me han de matar mañana, que me maten de una vez. Todos reconocen esa canción, ¿verdad? Bien, seguimos. Entonces es parte de la cultura, está en todas nuestras canciones. ¿Cuándo es exactamente? Después de que llegaron los españoles, después de que empezó el cristianismo, únicamente tenemos 2 o 3 días en que se celebran los días de muertos, pero en algunos lugares es muy específico, como en Oaxaca. So during colonial times, it became 3 days. So it began with the 30th of October, where the niños limbos, the babies that hadn't been blessed or baptized, that's when they came. On the 31st, it was the children, which is your Halloween, right? Our Halloween in the United States. And this is a very problematic issue, actually, at the border. It's problematic because this being such a sacred holiday for Mexicans, it becomes Halloween, right? The Grim Reaper. We laugh, people laugh at it. It's very difficult for people at the border, and we want for things to be distinguished and for people to understand that for Days of the Dead, we do not fear death. We're not mocking at the dead, right? We're not laughing at the dead. We are instead blessing them, celebrating them, feeding them. And so then there's Todos Santos, 1st of November, as everybody knows, All Saints, and the 2nd of November is the Day of the Dead. So that is the 4 days in terms of when is it. Now if you go to Oaxaca, you will find that they have in each town a specific time. Like when the babies, the stillborns died, they arrive, I think, from 3 to 5 in the morning, right? And so on and so forth. There's different age groups that arrive at different specific times. Now, why do we have cempasúchil? Why do we have la flor de San Juan? Las flores. ¿Por qué tenemos esas cosas? Porque son las flores y el olor de flores con el olor de veladora, por ejemplo, es un olor indiscutible, ¿no? Que les ayudan a las almas de los difuntos a regresar a su casa. So, everything has meaning. The flowers are so important. They represent the earth. The 4 elements are represented. In pre-Columbian times, there was no wax. Now we have all types of candles in the altars, but there was no wax. So they had an ocote. They would have something burning because fire had to be represented. El papel picado, the paper that you see, all these artistic paper, papel picado is everywhere up there, for example. That is the wind, that represents the wind, right? And of course, we usually have water either in the flowers that we put there, or we put separate containers of water because we want for our dead to have something to drink after they've been traveling for so long. Entonces, cada cosa tiene su significado. El copal, incense, which is tree resin, really that's the natural incense that we use. Copal, and of course Artemisa, sage, we burn them, and they are helping the dead come back to us. And also we make food for them. And in central and southern Mexico, especially in central and southern Mexico, we make the things that they like to eat. So for example, there has to be mole for my dad, right? In one of those days, because he loved mole. So you make what people liked to eat. And that is what is unusual, because I think it's the Hmong people and us who feed our dead. So it's a very special thing. But it all has to do with welcoming them back. The other thing I adore are the bands, the music, right? So if you go to any rural little town, they pay musicians to play at the cemeteries, to play for their dead. Or they take boom boxes to play the songs that the dead used to like. If you go to a cemetery in California, if you go to a place where Latinos live, go to a cemetery. In fact, that's my recommendation, where Latinos live, because it really is beautiful. We never forget our dead. And there's children there playing with their little brother or sister who died. There's people who bring balloons to their children. There's people who bring drinks and food to them. It's really amazing and beautiful, and you can find it here in the United States as well. So I think the main thing for me is that this celebration and this notion of death is a gift to the world from Mexico, from Mexican culture, because we are bringing hope, we are remembering our dead, we never forget our dead, and we know that we are remembered, because when people are forgotten, that's another way of dying. That's another way of dying. So in my altar, you will find many of my ancestors. And it's also wonderful to know, for me, I love from September to January, because I feel taken care of. I feel protected. And yesterday I read a couple of poems from pre-Columbian times, and since most of you were not here yesterday, I want to leave this with you and say that for many of the poets, one of them in particular, Netzahualcoyotl, talks about how you should straighten out your thinking, knowing that we are here only to dream. We're not here to suffer. Netzahualcoyotl, poeta precolombino, habla de cómo estamos en la tierra principalmente para soñar. Estamos aquí para soñar y hay que disfrutar ese sueño. No estamos aquí para sufrir, estamos aquí para soñar. Y dice que tienen que pensar de esta forma para no sufrir. Muchas gracias, felicidades, disfruten del día. Muchas gracias a Erika, muchas gracias a Bárbara, que es increíble, es toda una institución. Vamos a darles un aplauso a ellos.
Muchas gracias. Gracias, profesora. Fuerte el aplauso para ella. Please give her one big round of applause. Show that love. Bárbara, acompáñame a platicar de eso que traes ahí, ándale.